a conversation, or if you're happy, we can do some questions at the end. So if you don't want to sort of add anything as we go along, please put your hand up and we can take it then. If not, we can, hopefully talk about any of the relevant points at the end of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Andy.
Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Andy Oswald. I work at West Suffolk Council. I'm the Environment and Energy Team Leader. Been here for a very long time now, it feels. And yes, so welcome to this event, and hope you're enjoying the Bury Business Festival that's able to take advantage of some of the events that are on, or if this is your only one, hope you enjoy this one, and it's a good one. So what I thought I would talk about is some of the work that we've been doing as a local authority in West Suffolk, some of the sort of, why we're all doing this and why we're looking to reduce emissions, whether it's for reducing costs or to reduce our carbon footprint, or probably for both reasons. The good thing is about sort of this area is, there's multiple benefits. In most cases, it will provide a financial saving to the business, and it reduce your carbon emissions, which obviously it has a double-edged benefit to any of the work that we're doing. So yeah, so if you can go to the next slide, please, Hayley. So just if we just take it, why are we looking to do this, or what the size of the challenge is? So that this graph on the left shows our current areas where all our emissions are coming from. There's three main areas really, which is transport and industry, and then a reducing area, which is power. So how our electricity finds its way into our homes and buildings. The power industry has been sort of the most successful in reducing emissions over the last 10 years or so. It's been a big shift into renewables and into other generating, mainly renewables. Solar and wind basically have grown exponentially over the last 10 years, helped by government subsidies. Solar is now able to stand alone as a non-subsidy based technology and will save money. And I'll come on to more on what you can do and things like that at the moment, and specifically on a solar project. Transport and industrial emissions have been a little bit I guess they flatlined at the moment, or transport, if anything, has just started to increase slightly. But industry, there is scope for sort of quite significant improvements, but I think the transport one's going to be the hardest one to crack. It's an expensive technology to switch away from petrol and diesel. Looking here, obviously in West Suffolk, got the A14 chugging through, and a good chunk of the emissions coming through here are from potentially the trucks coming up and down the A14 out of Felixstowe. So I think the transport one's a tricky one. Obviously, we can all make choices in terms of the vehicles that we drive, but we're looking at it from our own point of view, and from the council's emissions point of view, our main two emission sources are our buildings and our transport fleet. We've got 180 vehicles, which half of them are the big sort of HGV or RCVs, which are the refuse collectors. And that's the challenge in terms of, one, which technology and the price of those technologies at the moment. So we're focusing on, I guess, the easier to win ones, which looking at our buildings and how we use energy at the moment. The transport is going to be the tricky one, which we'll probably do towards the back end. And then the little disc on the right hand side is where we need to get to if we're going to be net zero. So as you can see, we've got to take a lot of carbon out of our economy, and but I think we've all just we all tick along and do what I think it seems a massive challenge, but if we all do our bit, then we are seeing progress in that. So thank you, Hayley. So just to talk about some of the sort of the wider work that's going on across Suffolk, as hopefully most of you are aware, or you may not be, all of the local authorities in Suffolk have sort of progressed. Obviously, the national target was to be net zero by 2050. Over the last couple of years, 2019 mainly, the local authorities across Suffolk have made a pledge to be carbon neutral by 2030. So we've accelerated that by a mere 20 years, which and when we did this 2 years ago, you think, oh, we've got 10 years to do it. We're sitting here today, and in a couple of months' time, we've got 8 years to do it. So it's pretty crazy how the time flies by. But the Suffolk Climate Change Emergency Plan is a plan not just how the local authorities are going to look to deal with their own emissions, but it's a document for how all of Suffolk can work towards reducing emissions. So the plan's on the Green Suffolk website, and basically it's been split down into the themes. So there's domestic, business, transport, agriculture, and there's a series of work streams of how that's going to be delivered. and obviously, you know, nobody can do this alone, and it's going to take, you know, partnerships across not just across Suffolk, across the country and across the world. But this is our local plan of how we can look to decarbonise Suffolk, both in, you know, across all sectors of society. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that document when you get a chance. Thank you, Hayley. Just talk a little bit about us. I don't want to dwell too much on West Suffolk, but basically the slide on the left, or the diagram on the left, sort of shows some of the strategy that's got us to where we are today, and some of the key bits of policy that we link to that sort of justifies while we're looking to do what we can. You know, a big one, if you go from a policy point of view, there were the first big policies started to come out of the climate change agreement in Paris, which was you know, a groundbreaking piece of sort of international legislation, and then, you know, that then gets translates into international law, and then down into sort of the work that we do locally to sort of interpret local law and to put in policies down at what we do in the local authority area. But if you're ever sort of thinking, why are we doing this? You know, there are strategies. The UK government's Clean Growth Strategy is a key document which talks about decarbonisation, and there's a 25-year environment plan which links, you know, that's not just on energy, that's on biodiversity and a whole range of issues. And locally, you know, coming down to what we do on the right-hand side, now we started on this journey back in 1998. We become ISO 14001 accredited as St Edmundsbury Council in 2003. And we've continued to sort of deliver policies and put programs of action in place to help support the work that we do. So, thank you, Hayley. So just in terms of where we are in our journey, so we have been calculating our environmental outputs, I suppose, since 2010. This is our latest statement of where we are. So overall, our emissions are down 50% in the last 11 years. So when you sort of think of this as a huge task, how we're going to do it, it's amazing how, you know, by doing actions each year, it does start to actually make a significant difference. You know, the one caveat, sort of the asterisk that's not in there, a lot of that is driven by the decarbonisation of the grid. So the electricity that we buy is getting greener. So when you convert, you know, your electricity consumption and you look at where that electricity is being generated from, that can make a significant impact into the way you calculate your carbon. But, you know, we have been taking significant strides. I'm in West Suffolk House in Bury St Edmunds on Western Way today. This was a building we occupied 10 years ago. You know, it was built with ground source heat pumps. Since then, we've added 80 kilowatts of solar PV. All the lights are LED. So, you know, we've just opened a new hub in Mildenhall, which again, we've got a whole range of sort of renewable technologies in there to help reduce the impact of our buildings. So our buildings has been an area where we have been able to focus and invest on to reduce those carbon emissions. So on the table on the top right, you can see in 2010 we consumed using 8,000 tonnes of CO2, and we're now down to 4,000. Obviously, last year COVID was a big drop, as you can see on the little graph on the right-hand side. I'm anticipating that will increase slightly this year, but, you know, we want to keep it below that trajectory line, which has taken us through to 2030. But as I sort of alluded to earlier, our transport emissions are going to be half of those 4,000 remaining ones are in our transport fleet. And, you know, we've only got one electric vehicle on our fleet at the moment. You know, we're hoping to get more, but electric doesn't solve all our issues in terms of sort of the heavy goods vehicles going around emptying the bins in our rural area, where an electric vehicle, one, well, is very expensive, and two, the technology just simply isn't there to deliver the work that we need it to do. So that's the area we're going to have to, you know, hopefully the technology and markets and things will help in that area. So thank you, Hayley. So some of the services I'm going to talk about today, and some of the things that are available for you to support are on this slide here. We're going to cover the Anglia grants, the West Suffolk Green Business Grant, our own Solar for Business scheme, and our Renewable Heat for Business scheme. The right-hand top picture shows the Green Suffolk website. So if you type in Green Suffolk, that's got all the stuff on the SCEP, the Suffolk Climate Emergency Plan, which I just spoke about, and it's got a whole reams of information on how helping you at work and at home. Within that at work section, there is a recent document that's been published on all the grants that are available. Now, I looked at the document in preparation for this. It's 105 pages long, this document, on all the types of funding that's available. I didn't read all through it yesterday, but, you know, you can search through it, and, you know, depending on what type of business you are, but, you know, SME, whatever it is. But locally we can help you. June Davenport is on this call from Groundwork, who is one of the main delivery partners in helping SME businesses to decarbonise. And I'll talk about some of the services that we offer in more detail. On the bottom left, we've got, and on our own website and on the Green Suffolk website is our Solar for Business scheme and our Green Business Grant. But we'll cover those. Well, the one we're not going to cover is the Green Business Grant. So I'll just talk about that very quickly. As for businesses based in West Suffolk, it's £1,000, which is a grant that can be given for any type of energy efficiency measure you do. So I approved a grant yesterday for a firm that just put a small battery storage system in. It's a match funding grant up to £1,000. It's a 2-page application form, very easy to apply for. Most, over the last 5 years, LED lighting's obviously been one of probably the biggest recipient measure for grants. But we've done stuff like boilers, refrigeration units, compressors, anything that can generate and can justify and demonstrate an energy saving should be eligible for the grant. And the other services there I'll touch on as we move through the presentation. Thank you, Hayley. One project I just did want to touch on is 2 years ago we received some European funded money, and we can still receive that as we are still in the funding round of European money. And we've named this project Access. It's primarily targeted at Mildenhall Hall Industrial Estate, but we are looking for this to grow. These are 2 of the industrial units that we own in Mildenhall Hall, where we've before the project started, we put our solar panels on the buildings. But what we're setting up here, it's a research type project, but we're looking to see if we can actually use a small geographic area. So those solar, I've got 7 sites with West Suffolk Council solar panels on that building. At all times, those businesses aren't always using that solar. So can we, through a trading system, move that solar into, say, the building next door or other ones on the site to purchase that power at a reduced rate from the grid, and so reducing, 1, the amount of energy that's been exported into the grid and keep it on the site, and 2, reduce the overall consumption actually going through the substation at Mildenhall. So we've got 2 partners on board. One is this company which deals with the peer-to-peer trading. They're called Urban Chain, and you would enter into electricity supply contract with Urban Chain, and basically they're buying up exported renewable energy and then providing that to you at a business. Typically, so we've had them look at what we could do on this building. The energy savings available typically are about 25 to 30% of typical grid electricity costs. So there's a real opportunity here, one, to save money and just try and use energy in a smarter way and use it locally and sort of reduce the overall amount of energy coming down into the grid to specific geographic areas. Then the other partner in board is a company called GridDuck, and they're putting on monitoring devices onto key pieces of equipment in businesses. So we've got a site on there signed up, which they make. They're a metal company making metal cabinets. So they've got high energy usage, but a lot of machines, whether it be presses, compressors, and we're monitoring that energy to see exactly on the business where that energy is being used. And then can we turn off some of those machines at the times when there's high electricity costs? So some of you, I don't want to get into too much to do, but electricity, you either get your standard sort of rate of 15p, but within that there's quite a few variable rates in there, which is sort of time of use tariff. So if you've got what's called a pass-through energy contract, you'll see it broken down by all the different rates that you're paying at different times of the day. If you can not use power between sort of 4 and 6 in the evening, especially the winter evening, you can save significant amount of sums on your energy bill, because that's when electricity is very expensive to purchase from the utility companies. So we're looking to see if can you shift the way you do your business or use power at different times of the day. So we're monitoring it, looking at when they're using power, and then can we use it at different times. That's a project. It's in Mildenhall at the moment, but we can roll it out beyond that if anyone's interested. And I think the next slide, Hayley, just talks about what we're actually trying to achieve out of it. So we're looking to engage 50 businesses, actually deliver measures into 10 to 15 businesses. So we're having to sort of do an energy baseline. What is the energy consumption at the moment? What will it be after we've done measures, and then we've got some specific targets in terms of what we're looking to save in terms of energy efficiency improvement related, into kilowatt hours and the CO2 savings. So that's a project that we're working on at the moment, and yes, that's there and is available for businesses. Thank you, Hayley. One of the main things I did want to talk about is our Solar for Business scheme. If any of you are based in West Suffolk, you may have received a letter from us this year. We did a marketing campaign over the sunny summer months. I've had a very good response to it. So in 2015, we launched what we've called West Suffolk Solar for Business. It's a scheme where the council we invest and purchase solar panels that are installed on third-party buildings, whether we've done everything from community centres to a church, through to large-scale, industrial sites with, well, our largest site's got over 2,000 solar panels on a roof at a factory in Newmarket. So basically, we fund, own, and maintain the solar panels. The business doesn't have to make any financial investment, and you benefit from the electricity that's generated from those solar panels, and we can sell you the electricity at a rate of 10 pence per kilowatt hour, which will generate you both a financial saving, but then you can also claim that the environmental sort of carbon benefits of not purchasing the grid electricity and using that 100% renewable energy. We started it in 2015. We've now got over 60 businesses signed up to this, and it works very well. It's proved that it's successful, and we've got further funding to carry on delivering it. For us, we do make a small financial return out of it, so it self-generates, and it's going to be here hopefully for long term. When we first started out, we linked it to the feed-in tariff, but now, like I say, so the cost of solar has come down significantly, and we can just do it where we make a small return by selling that electricity into the business building. The legal agreement is a 25-year lease signed between the council and the landlord of the building. It does work when there's a landlord-tenant arrangement. We work on the legal side of that with each business. So we continue to do that. Like I say, we did some marketing this summer, and I've got 46 new sites that we're now working through to see where we can put further solar panels on across West Suffolk. So anyone got any questions on that scheme, just while we're there? That's one of the main things I did want to touch on this morning.
Hi Andy, it's Hayley. There is a question in the chat, not particularly about that scheme, and it might be one for Junior yourself to pick up in a little bit, about whether there are similar schemes available in other areas. Someone who's interested in something in East Suffolk. I know there are sort of various, not quite the same as that, but different ones.
Yes. So Suffolk County Council, through David Walton at Suffolk Climate Change Partnership, there is funding available to do this across Suffolk. So that wouldn't be a West Suffolk funded scheme, but Suffolk County Council have replicated what we've done here. And absolutely, there is. You can see it on the Green Suffolk website. If not, we'll just get in contact with me. My email details are at the end, and I can put you in contact. So yes, we can facilitate installs across Suffolk. So absolutely.
Lovely. Thanks, Andy. And I'll dig out that link and circulate it later with the links. There is another question as well from someone who's interested to know how hydrogen might be able to make an impact and how far off that reusable technology might be as well.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So we have been engaged in looking at hydrogen. There is an organisation that's been set up recently called Hydrogen East. So I'd encourage you to Google Hydrogen East, which is basically it's a group of people interested in developing the hydrogen economy. It's not a commercial outfit, but they're looking at 3 areas for hydrogen. They're looking to see, can they do something up at Bacton in Norfolk, where all the gas is coming into the country. They're looking at a hydrogen site in Lowestoft, and potentially coming out of Sizewell. We've looked at hydrogen in the West Suffolk, and the main area where we think it would be in transport. And could we do something, one with our waste fleet? There's 2 parts. You need to manufacture the hydrogen and then find the use for it. The technology exists in terms of electrolyzers. We can make it, but it's who's going to start making it without the demand. It's kind of that chicken and egg on where do we start with this. But it's certainly in a part of the economy that's looking to grow. We haven't done anything in it yet. It's sort of in that watching space now. That there's some trials in the northwest where they're mixing it into the main gas grid. I think it's in the Warrington area. They've got about 20% going into the grid. Pilkington Glass up in the northwest have now got a large hydrogen plant and helping. They're a high energy user to make their glass. So yes, it's coming, but it's not. You know, it's early days, but I think let's probably sit in here in 5 to 10 years' time. I think it will certainly be part of the mix, and the way that we're consuming energy will be using hydrogen. But Hydrogen East is probably a good place to start in terms of if you think there's a use that may be suitable for yourselves. Obviously, there are some hydrogen vehicles. Toyota manufacture a hydrogen vehicle, but it's just getting that, getting the fuel as well at the moment. So it is coming, I think, would be my, but it's early days. So this is where June was going to take over. I spoke to June last night. She was very croaky and throaty. Now, I don't know if June would like to talk or whether you'd like me to carry on, June, and you can pick up any questions at the end. How are you feeling? Is she there? I thought I did see her name, but that's fine. I'll continue. So June Davenport, who...
Hi, Andy. Yeah.
Would you like me to talk, or would you like to...
No, I'm okay to talk. Can everybody see me now and hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you could go through the next slide, please. That's great. So Andy's spoken about the road to net zero, and so this graph is just talking about all the various different initiatives that he's spoken about and the themes that we need to get to net zero by 2030. And I'm June Davenport, and I work for Groundwork East, and we've been involved in the Be Anglia project for the last 5 years. So I'll be speaking about the Be Anglia project and also our charter project as well. So could I have a next slide, please? Okay, so how do you get to a net zero business? Because that's the challenge facing all our small to medium enterprises across Suffolk and Norfolk, where Be Anglia is offering support. So loads of people don't really know where to start. They don't know how they can change. Is it even possible for a business? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples that will help you see that it is. The next slide, please. So one of the businesses that have been a gold charter member for a while now is Stoke Sources, and they've been on a very sustainable journey with Suffolk Greenish County to get where they are now, and to do that they've changed a lot of the things within their business that have enabled them to then progress from getting charter membership at the bronze level, then the silver, and then the gold. And so that's an example of a food-based business that can do that and actually change the way they operate to be more sustainable. So I'll leave you to look at their website, because this obviously will be followed up with the slides and everything afterwards. But that's one of the businesses we've supported. And then if you can move on to the next slide, please. So Precision Marketing has had Be Anglia support and is also a gold charter member as well. And this is a statement they've made about how the support has helped them. So it's a very strong statement about how becoming carbon neutral is something they've been striving towards for the past 6 years, for the benefit of not only the planet and their employees, but also their customers too. And their official business neutral model is something they're going to continue on for the future. And they've benefited from grant funding from Be Anglia and also the support through the Greenish County and the Carbon Charter. So they're another exemplar business that you can look at their website and learn more about how they've done it. So those are two real businesses in the Suffolk area that you can learn from and see how they've done on their journey. But I'll explain now a bit about the what is the Carbon Charter. So it's an accreditation scheme to recognise businesses working towards net zero. And there's different levels, as I mentioned before. You've got bronze, silver, or gold is the exemplar that we want everybody to get to. But everyone has to start this journey somewhere. So bronze recognises that you are actually beginning to think about sustainability in a business. And the way you apply for a Carbon Charter membership is you can get it free at the moment through Be Anglia. as long as you are eligible as an SME. And we will then work with you to produce a carbon charter submission, which goes to a independent panel made up of different experts, including the county council. And they will then verify that you've begun your journey, you have a carbon footprint, an environmental policy and an action plan, which we would have helped you to write. So it's not something that we give businesses no support on. We're there to help on this journey. And then once they've verified that you've met the levels required for a bronze carbon charter membership, then that's what you get accredited as. And then we give you guidance on how you would move through to silver and gold. As I mentioned earlier, both of the businesses spoke about, they've actually been through this journey and got to gold now. So it's really worth going onto these information sites, carboncharter.org, to look about other case studies of businesses that have made that work for them. If we can move on to the next slide now, thanks. So this outstanding impacts is what we're starting to look at for a business when we talk about the carbon charter. So what do they do next? We provide them easy templates, plain English guides and free consultancy for members only. As I said, Anglia will pay for your initial accreditation, and then after that you get a chance every 2 years to renew it and decide the level of support that you want to pay for to progress your journey through to silver and gold. But on the Carbon Charter website, there's so many resources now for you to tap into. You can see them for quite a bit of it for free as a non-member, just general public going onto that website. But when you're a member, you get your own specific area, so you can learn from each other and network with people who are also members. But that's obviously been invaluable throughout the pandemic when we couldn't hold actual physical events. But the last physical event we were able to hold was last summer, and it was a really successful event with nearly 100 businesses there that are all charter members and active and learning from each other how to get further on their journey to net zero. Next slide, please. So I mentioned Anglia earlier. We've been involved with Anglia and delivering the project on behalf of Suffolk County Council, Norfolk County Council. It's funded through the European Union Regional Development Fund, and we've been involved with it, and I've got a team of advisors that I manage that basically have been delivering the project for 5 years now. So we have over 850 businesses that we've supported through the charter and energy audits, and 240 Norfolk and Suffolk businesses have received grant funding, and you can get funding of up to 40% of your energy efficiency measure that you want to implement within your business. The scheme actually ends next summer, so there are still grants available, so come to us now because we need to get that funding out to as many businesses as we can before the scheme ends, but we still do have funding. And I can tell you a bit about the sorts of things that are funded. If you go to our website, there's actually a whole list there, but as it says on this slide, there's up to 40% we can offer for various different eligible costs. The 40% rate usually applies to things like battery storage, heat recovery systems. That's also can be for electric vehicles as well. And then it drops down, depending on the technology, to 30% for solar panels, air source heat pumps, or electric passenger vehicles such as taxis, insulation, and LED floodlights. So if you had a big area of your business that you needed floodlights for. But if you go for normal LED lighting, because that's becoming more and more standard for businesses anyway, we only offer 20% for that. But it's still worth any business looking into this, because we can support you through the grant process and get you that funding that otherwise you would never have got. Next slide, please. So the other thing that's ongoing at the moment is the Greenest County Awards, and that was launched this year on the 8th of September, and you can enter that by the 14th of October, so that's 2 days' time. So if anyone has been doing lots of green initiatives and they feel like they would appreciate going for that award, so that they've got a marketing opportunity to tell the rest of the world how good they are, then please do look at that and go for it. I'm sure my colleague at Suffolk County Council would be really pleased to actually receive more entries. So do be mindful of that. And if you can spread that around your network of businesses you know about, that would be really useful. Thank you. And then the last slide is just summarising the people involved with Anglia and the Carbon Charter. My colleague Amy Coulter has been involved in the charter and running it on behalf of Suffolk County Council for a lot of years now. She's got a huge amount of experience. So if you've got any more direct questions, you can either email them to myself, which I'll ping round my details in a minute, or Amy. And if you are interested in Anglia, then you can just find us on our website or use the email address there. And overall, we've been working with Ned Harrison at the council, who project manages the council element of these projects. So that's it really, from my viewpoint. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, but Andy's obviously got his details on that slide as well. But thanks for your attention, everybody.
Thank you, Andy and Jean. That was really, really useful. And I have put in the chat, we'll send out a link to all the different resources you've mentioned. I've been scribbling down different web links, so you'll get the slides, but we'll send links to those as well. And really good to touch on some of the funding bits. If people have got questions, do type them in. But I have one in the meantime, which goes back to one of your really early slides, actually, Andy. You showed a really useful where you commented on the council's emissions dropping, since 2010 by 50%, and you had different things. And I just wondered, we've talked in a lot of these about the fact that to be able to really improve something, you have to be able to measure it to start with. And I wondered, either June or Randy, what advice you had for businesses who were at that stage of now starting to monitor and audit and measure what they're using. I mean, how do you even start knowing what you can save because you know what you're using?
Yeah, obviously, to start that, you need to actually measure where you are at a point in time, and what is called setting your baseline. So you could start your baseline from the 12th of October. You could look at over the past 12 months how much gas, electricity you've consumed, how many business miles you've driven, or how many fuel receipts. You can look at what you've actually purchased as a business. So whether it's paper or paper cups, we do pretty much monitor everything from how much we recycle, what we're purchasing, what we're recycling. We look at gas, electricity invoices, and transport emissions, water as well. So the main thing is as much data as you can collect, then that makes that easier then to actually look at ways of reducing that. So for larger businesses, you want to make sure you're on a half-hourly meters, for example, for your electricity if you can. So you can then look at each half hour, where are you looking at electricity. Quite often when you through the work that June and Anglia do, they'll look at half-hourly data, and you'll see you've got some businesses will have quite high energy consumption when the business is closed. And you think, what's going on there? They're leaving bits of kit on or machines on. So you can put that onto a graph to see when your electricity is being consumed, and the same through gas with an AMR meter. So that the more sort of metering and things you can put in place to actually get an idea of where you're consuming power, which is consuming emissions at the end, the best of it. It's just looking through what you're doing as a business, and how you can change that. So obviously the fuels is the big one, really. Transport and then your building emissions. But you set your baseline and then start to think, right, what's some of the easy things we can do? And is it rerouting, transport arrangements, Is it turning bits of equipment off? Is it changing bits of equipment? You know, when I first started in this job, I didn't realize how much power a compressor would use. If you're in a business that's got a compressor that's got a few air leaks in it, you know, that's just wasting energy all the time. So and compressors use a lot of power, and there are a lot more efficient ones out there. So sort of that bit of kit that might just sit on whirring around in the background, but we didn't realize it's consuming a lot of electricity. So monitoring and measuring is, I'd say, is the key to that. But no, through the B Anglia scheme, we can offer audits for businesses, and you'll have an independent person who could come in and carry out that audit for you. Then you would have almost that baseline data. You just have to provide, you know, those gas, electricity bills, and then you can have a footprint and audit done to create that baseline.
Thanks, Andy. That's, yeah, June?
Yeah, I would add that it's simple things that not necessarily are big wins, but will start people on the journey. For example, behaviour change with people who are in offices. If you are leaving things on all the time, you know, in the kitchen or the light, the office areas, the lighting, people leave their PCs when they're not even working on them, laptops. It's that behaviour change that Carbon Trust normally say you can reduce up to 5 or even 10% of your energy costs if you know what they are, and then you normally we analyse them, and you can show exactly what your carbon footprint is by the amount of energy you consume from your utility bills, and then you will know that if you have a period of time where you look at it 6 months later and you've introduced some staff awareness posters, we've taken people through carbon literacy courses to get them to understand that switching off things really does matter, and you can save energy that easily. You don't have to necessarily spend money to save money and go on the energy journey. So I'll just reiterate that for some businesses there are quick wins straight away, really, and COVID has shown that, because obviously a lot of people closed down their businesses and saved a bit on energy last year, and they will notice a difference now they're reopening them.
That's great advice. That engage your employees. Do the basic stuff before you necessarily.
And then think about whether you want to change all your lighting or improve your heating, because those capital costs take a while to pay back, and they are good in the long run, but you've just got to think about how beneficial they're going to be straight away, and what else you could do that could actually save money quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll pick up. Paula, who mentions being their business, as with a lot, and we hear this a lot, is conducted from within a shared tenanted building. So they can't do anything about their power supply and things like that, but can influence what they buy, sell and package to customers. Is there any support available for those kind of activities?
Yeah, I mean, if they were to go through the charter membership, they definitely have ideas from other businesses in that membership group within Suffolk and Norfolk, who perhaps have done that as well, looked at their supply chain.
Stokes, the example in the presentation of Stokes. Now, I know they've changed all the plastic bottles of their sources. They're buying 100% recycled plastic, for example. So you can look at where you're sourcing your packaging from. There's probably the good answer. I presume Stokes have got a case study. You've got a case study of how they've done that, have you, June? And sort of the work that they've done.
Yeah, I mean, the Carbon Charter website's got so much on it, and we've upped all the case studies recently, so that you could probably find a business that's akin to yours amongst all of them. But yeah, it's about thinking ahead and thinking about if they did that, are they actually going to improve their carbon footprint? Because sometimes changing packaging creates more of a carbon footprint, so you just have to be careful what packaging types you do change to, because of the recycled element. And also some businesses we've found change packaging, but then that's affected if you get it delivered somewhere and it's not in the solid state that you want it to be when it gets there. You have to think about that. So removing all packaging, you can't always do that, but you can definitely minimise what is sent, because we know for years and years people have overpackaged everything, really.
Brilliant, thank you both. We've got another question as well. So Dan is at Farmers. Hi Dan. We're looking to net zero as a business so that we can show their farmer members that they practice what they preach. They've got about 1,300 plus farmer members who they want to work towards net zero. They're lucky enough to have benefited from an ERDF grant, but farmers aren't eligible. Is there any support available for agricultural companies who are looking to reduce their carbon emissions, which I know is a tricky one. I know a lot of our funding doesn't apply to agriculture too.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Anglia can't support agricultural-based businesses. We've supported the diversification of a business. So, for example, the farm has a cafe or some sort of tourism thing based on their farm, then we've supported that as that's running as a separate business just based on that land. But we can't offer support directly to farm-based businesses in agriculture because it is classed as ineligible from the funders' viewpoint, ERDF. So our hands are tied on that, unfortunately.
We first for the West Suffolk farmers there, the Green Business Grant would apply to the agricultural sector. That's not particularly limited in quite the same scope because that's locally funded from here. And also on the solar side that we talked there, both in West Suffolk and the scheme that Suffolk County Council are running, they would be eligible. So if they wanted to have third-party solar panels installed, we could fund those. So they're coming from different funding streams. So there is some support. But yeah, unfortunately, that is a sector that has been limited by European funding. There is something. That document I alluded to on the Green Suffolk website, that large document will probably, I haven't read it in full detail, but I'm sure there'll be some bits in there that we should be able to offer to that sector.
Thanks both. That's really useful. Like I say, we'll send out those links. There's a great question here from Nick. We're a church thinking about travelling into our building. What's the best way to look at it? Is it best to think about ourselves as a hub, so we work on our own usage, and then assume those visited are counted as part of their household? So one sort of looking at sort of travel movement as well, but an interesting one. What's the best way to start looking at their uses as a church? So obviously somewhere that people are coming to visit.
I've not had that question before. I was just trying to see if we've got
I think both. You've got a building asset there, haven't you? Like I say, we have installed solar panels on a church. We've done one in Great Barton, where they've got a cafe. But I think you need to do. You can look at the building itself, make sure your insulation and your heating system and your lighting is efficient as possible, and then you can work with your congregation to see encourage sort of that sort of how they're going to travel there, and is there any lift shares. There's in Suffolk, we've got the Suffolk lift share scheme, which tries to match up people that are travelling to same points, and you can put in where you live and where you're looking to get to. So there's a lift share scheme. I don't know quite how that's been worked. I presume during COVID again that's been restricted, but hopefully these things will come back. But we're doing some work with schools on like anti-idling and that kind of thing. So transport is an area where you can do make sure people aren't sitting outside schools or maybe churches with their engine running, that kind of thing. But there's leaflets and information available on the transport side. But I think you do both. Look at your own building as a separate site, and then look at how people are travelling there. But from a footprinting point of view, you wouldn't. The way people travel to your building from a church, I don't think that would count as part of your footprint. That would be sit outside the scope of that, because they're not directly employed or related to the church, is how I'd understand that.
That's really useful. Thanks, Andy. So yeah, it's a difficult one to start thinking. I did put in the chat as well, we've got a session on the 20th, particularly about travel and transport with Transport East, who might have different ideas. But one of the things actually from those conversations that we've done ourselves at New Anglia is exactly as you mentioned, Andy, an education piece. On our website now, we have information about reaching us in a more sustainable way. Our offices aren't actually that easy to get to by public transport. Most people tend to drive, but we've put on there information about electric taxis, how to reach us by bus, where the nearest bus stop actually is if you want to come by bus and things like that. So I'll put the link back, but we obviously didn't cost us anything to do it. We just found the information, asked staff, actually, do you know how to get here by bus? And put a bit just as a starting point. So hopefully we can, is that education piece of encouraging people, like I say, it's not necessarily in your own escape, but to come to you in a more sustainable way if they can, and lift share and things like that. So that's a really good one, a really positive way to start thinking. I've picked up all the questions at the moment. I did have one other one as well, because we talked about things like LED lighting, which, as Eugene said, is becoming much more common, which is great in businesses and actually relatively straightforward to change. You mentioned as well, Andy, touched upon insulation, which I know is something, if you're heating your building, that you can, a lot of this is well about saving money as well as being sort of moving towards net zero. And I just wonder, how do people go about that kind of thing? That's a big area that I know a lot of businesses could feasibly save is on by having better insulation, or looking at perhaps where they're sort of leaking heat out into the atmosphere as well.
Yes, I think the audit, certainly if you went through the Anglia audit, that would pick that up. They'd be looking to see what levels of insulation in there, and then once you've identified, do you need your walls or your lofts or some cladding? There are plenty of contractors in the marketplace in that space that do, both from the domestic and on the commercial side. Obviously, loft's the obvious one, isn't it? If you've got, a suspended loft ceiling, can you get further insulation in there? And it's a relatively low cost measure that will have a shorter payback. Getting more expensive stuff, do you need to put some cladding, insulated cladding? Or if you're in an old sort of factory unit, do you need to change your roof? If you're changing a roof now, just go through building regs, you'd have to make sure it's an insulated roof. But you're talking high capital costs, as you are, glazing as well. Sometimes a lot. Glazing in terms of energy saving has small factors, but there are other benefits in terms of the visual appearance and the sound, better soundproofing. But some of that insulation on sort of large industrial sites can be relatively expensive. So you certainly want to look at the lower cost insulation, like loft and walls tend to be the cheaper ones, going through to sort of glazing, cladding and new roofs at the end of it. But it's, there's plenty of contractors out there that offer those services, that are based locally that could do that.
Yeah, and through Anglia, we've given out insulation grants to businesses for solid wall and also loft or cavity wall insulation. They do attract different intervention rates, as in different grant percentage that we'll give people, because we have to do a calculation using our calculator tool on the carbon savings. And some of those things, the carbon savings are lower than others. And so we would give them a lower grant percentage, but it's still worth doing because there are still savings to be made. And it's one of the things that people don't always look at straight away. They think about the fancy renewables they could add on to their roof or install underground, but they don't necessarily think about how heat loss affects the way the building fabric is at the moment and how they could improve it. It's usually only when businesses are planning extensions or renovation works that they think about it, but they should all the time, really.
Thank you. Like I said, it might be one of those things, if you've got a little less control, that you can actually implement and do, like I say, with hopefully some support as well, should be good. We've got Stuart typing. There's no more questions as yet, so I'll see if Stuart's got a question. But yeah, that's useful. Stuart's question is, can anything like insulation grants be provided retrospectively?
Not through Anglia, I'm afraid. Our funders are very strict on the criteria, and you can only have a grant approved and funded ahead of the work starting, because we have to prove that the grant intervention is additional, which means that you would have only done it as part of having a grant available. So if you've already managed to afford it yourself, then unfortunately the funders see that as not improving the environmental thing using these grant funding offers. It is difficult, I know, because lots of businesses only hear about us after they've done the installation, which is really sad and frustrating, but our hands are tied on the matter, I'm afraid.
You can always look to anything else you can do, Stuart.
Yeah, take another step.
That's it. Just think about anything else you can do, because now you're aware of the grant, but it's still available. See if you can think of anything else.
I'm looking at solar. That's great, Stuart. I'm sure there's plenty of Andy's your man.
Yeah,
you can't help and send it to someone who can.
Yeah, I mean, we work in conjunction with West Suffolk and what they can offer, so we would always speak to the business and offer them the best option.
That's fab. Thank you both. Paula's typing a question as well. But yeah, simple messages.
And for your grant, you were just saying that June, it's finished. You have to apply by the end of the year. Is that what I picked up?
Well, we're trying to get all the grant funding that we have left allocated by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because we've got to close down this project July next summer, but it sounds like a long time away, but in actual fact it's not, in terms of claiming back grants and getting everything spent. So we're just trying to make sure that if we can get everybody to apply by Christmas and get approved, then we'll be able to give the funding as widely as possible to as many businesses as possible. But there'll be businesses that we've approved a grant for, and whatever reason things drop out. So I expect it would be watch this space from January onwards. There still might be some funding that pops up, and we may over allocate the pot to expect that. But ideally, the sooner people can apply, the more guarantee they actually will get an offer of grant funding.
Thanks.
That's great. So yeah, hopefully that's provided you with plenty of inspiration, ideas, lots of questions. But like I say, we'll send out a link later to the recording of this and the slides, and I'll find as many of those links as I can as well to share with you. So hopefully you can take it away, share with colleagues. Oh, sorry, I managed to mute myself. Share with your colleagues, your teams, your members, and people you speak to. I have put a link in as well to the rest of our Clean Growth for Business events. We've got another half a dozen events over the next few weeks, a couple more this week, covering different topics, but we are doing travel and transport. We've also got one about water. Andy mentioned water use as well. We've got one of those early November. So it's lovely to see you. Well, thank you all very much. Do come to us. You've all got, I'll send those contact details around if you have any questions. But as Jean and Andy have both said, if you've got an idea for something you can do in your business, just come forward and ask. I think is the best way to do it. They'll certainly send you in the right direction and probably save you some digging around as well, which is always handy because everyone's very busy. So please do come back further down the line if you've got any questions. But in the meantime, thank you all very much, and stay warm. I'm freezing. We need to sort out some insulation in my house, I think. So nice to see. I know it's nice to see you all, and take care. And hopefully we'll see you at another event soon. Take care. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Jean.
Thanks so much, Hayley. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.